welcome back once again to my show, Noble by Richa, a leadership podcast. And today we have Omar with us here. And it is going to be a very raw conversation with him, unfiltered. And he is going to share his expertise, his knowledge, and his entire journey with us. So, welcome to the show, Omar.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Most welcome, Omar. And our audience wants to know about your journey, your experience, so that we step into our next question.
Perfect. It will probably take a very long time to explain my journey, but I'm going to try to sum it up and fulfill it here in a very brief journey. So I have always been a marketeer. So I have started my early career as an entrepreneur and then with family of entrepreneurship. Then I decided to join the world of marketing and analytics. I had quite a bit of a skill in analyzing and finding trends, and that drew me to this path. Then I started working in the US with a Fortune 500 company, one of the top leaders in marketing for a while. And I just loved what I do. And then I decided to take it a notch and I moved to a different company again with the same category, large corporate, to do the analytics. And that's how I started with my current career. So with analytics, marketing, and I combined both. Then I went to the operations, then to the bit of design, a bit of a forward looking and predictive, and the combination of everything now. Then we added AI to it, so it's becoming a marketing AI um, kind of career, in operations kind of career. So that's how my career started, with over, I would say, 15 years now of experience in the same domain, that it keeps evolving. That's basically a summary of my career.
So, Omar, how was your shift of journey from a entrepreneur family to coming to the corporate? So, what changes were there, and how did you tackle the entire journey?
It was the most difficult part of my life and decision making for me and my family, as I decided to step away from a traditional kind of, a family oriented approach, to me taking my things on my own and working for a company and doing things differently. It was definitely a challenge. And I was worried that I would fail and I will end up going back to, to the family business and try to fit in there. But I think the entrepreneurship DNA, if I might say, played a big role in my actually current career. So there is a both help that came from that background, and also there is quite a bit of help that I have now that I provide to the family and to the entrepreneurship. So I think there is a quite I become the bridge between both, and I do not regret my decision of moving where I am, as I'm very thankful and very happy, and I love what I'm doing today. So it's something that keeps me going. But in the meantime, I have no regrets. I have no regrets, and I'm more than happy to bridge the gap even further.
So, what exactly Omar, had to hide in his entire journey and to reach to a level where he is currently? So, can you explain on this question?
Yeah, this is actually a great fundamental question. Um, I think in my current career, in the career of marketing and operations and corporate, I had to hide that entrepreneurship spirit. Hiding it, not omitting it, right? So there are both different approaches here, because I had to hide the fact that I could challenge every single thing that I see within my team today, the way things are done, and I had to also keep, as we say, keep the dice rolling. So keep going with whatever things are. So because if I keep challenging every single piece of it, we will never get somewhere. And I will also be perceived as a hard person to work with, because I will basically not criticize, but I will question and challenge this very piece. But I learned within my career that you have to hide that part and work with the flow and help out as you go. You can't just stop everything. So that's the first thing that I learned. The second thing, I do have ADHD, so it is a superpower in some extent, but also it's a curse, because when you speak with the team and when you deal in this corporate world, you have to basically, as an ADHD person, you have to think of multiple scenarios, and there's a lot of worry, it's a lot of trust, a lot of moving parts. So I had to also not down on tone down actually this part of myself a little bit, and focus on execution, focus on providing reliability and understanding the system before trying to change it. I think that's the part that I hide most. And funny enough, actually, it became, a power that led me to lead a large, transformational project. Than just a block. So I think it's worked out for the best at the end of the day.
So how did you manage to be, so humble, coming from an entrepreneur family? Definitely, when you're working in corporate, I'm sure you must have faced like situation or the comment that, okay, you are from a, entrepreneur family, why you're working here? Such questions we do come across. So how did you tackle that situation? And at the end, how did you, chose to stay so humble?
So, well, I don't think coming from at least for me, coming from an entrepreneurial background is something that you not necessarily get that humble away from your personality. I think what keeps me going and humble is the success part of it, right? So if I manage something, a team or a program, and then I see success, a measured success every day, for me that satisfaction, it's superior to what I'm going to get from entrepreneurship, because it's all about taking the risk. It's all about results. It's all about growing, right? If I look at my career growth and the team growth and career growth, it is successful for me. It is fast, it's big, and it has been, measured. So I consider that if I look at it from a personal company, I feel like I grew my company fast enough and big enough, and that keeps me, happy, and that gives me that comparison. I'll say, it's I grow this as if it was my own business. So I treat every project as my own business, and it's growing. As long as it's growing, I'm very happy and satisfied with my results there. So there is no regrets. And being humble, I think it's a personality thing more than anything else. Um, I like to get into the woods and then get into the details sometimes and work out work situations or work condition with every single person, because I believe there is always something to learn from anyone, and that is what keeps you. Actually, there's one of the secrets for success is humbleness. The more you humble, the more you interact, the more you're more to observe and learn from other people, the more successful you're gonna be. So it's a recipe, I guess.
So, like, what advice you want to give to the the leadership out there in the corporate world? Suppose they are handling a team, and suppose their team members want to do some startup or they want to go on an entrepreneur journey. So, like, what do you think? How those leaders should tackle these kind of questions?
So leadership, they have to build a good and close relationship with their team members, right? And understanding their personalities and their goals and their hopes and everything. I think that gives you a perspective on their personalities, and it helps you firstly work with them better, because now you know who could do what better, because they love what they're doing and you know their personality, so you'll assign the work and you work with them closely in a very good relationship. It will enable you from that close, working relationship, which makes you assign the right work for the right person and have them succeed at it. So it's both. It's a good relationship to have. It's serving both sides, if I may say. So that's the first thing. So getting closer to that, and I think I will, at least for myself, again, I am always encouraging anyone I know who wants to pursue a way of life that they please. If they are entrepreneurial and they want to take that path, that road, I will definitely encourage them, but I would also advise them to look at what they're doing today from an entrepreneurial point of view and apply those skill sets here. And then once they grow, and then you can do that transition to their personal growth. So that's how I would look at it. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, definitely. And moving to the next question, Omar, suppose, with your designation, which you have definitely earned in your entire journey, suppose it is taken aside. So, how you want the world and your audience, your entire team, to know you? Like, who will be Omar apart from the designation?
So Omar is a person who likes to solve problems. So I do like to problem solve everything. I like to help. So, and I think that both are connected. So I do, again, the ADHD piece comes to mind because as soon as I talk or I hear something, for me, it's a problem. I need to get into these problem solving um, skill set or mindset, right? So that is, I think that's one of the things that regardless of my title, I will always be the problem solver, whether it's with, charity, whether it's a family, whether it's a friend conflict. That is something that I will always aspire for, and something that I love to do, and what it made me successful in my career, and probably in an entrepreneurship life as well. The second thing is the strategic, well, structured, I would say, structured thinking, right? Um, the way I look at the fact that I learned from my life that every problem, if you break it down, you solution it and you find solution to it and you solve it. That's something that I will always also think in my mind that, regardless of job title, that's who I am. I will, take that analogy and solve the things like that. Um, Interaction with different culture and people management. So I think those are skill set that I have regardless of my career today, regardless of job title. I like working with people. I like working with a different culture, different backgrounds, finding those connections. I think that's for me. There's a pleasure associated with that, getting to know people, people to know me, my travels, my interactions, and I would like to hear their stories as well. That is something that I always love to do in my life. So career or no career, title or no title, it's something that I will always have and be. Even in the street when I go and I get to meet someone, or on a plane, strangers sitting next to me and we start a conversation. The fact that we have a lot of experiences and different backgrounds, different languages, it makes our life a lot easier and interesting.
So, on this answer of yours, I want to ask a question. It might sound little bit controversial. Do you think that designation matters a lot in corporate, where people are sometimes making advantage, maybe? But at the end, they need to understand that it is a designation. Definitely, they have earned that designation, but there's a life beyond the designation, and they need to have a balance of it.
Yes and no. Depends on how you look at it. So the designation matters in large corporation because that keeps the structure going and keeps things aligned, and especially in a complex corporate that I work in currently. So I think designations matters because it does create that sort of like segregation of responsibilities and duties and everything. If that's the first part. So does it matter in corporate? Yes. In terms of structure, yes. Aside from that, you're at the end of the day, you're a person. So if you have that connection with people, and I think the designation, then it doesn't matter, right? If you have that trust, you work. Again, you're at the end of the day, your end goal is to solve a problem, right? Whether you are, yes, of course, responsible for it or not. But I think getting together with those team and breaking that barrier of designation sometimes helps, solving a certain, issues and conflicts. So that's the thing. I think that's what I understood from your question is whether the designation matters in solving a problem. Correct?
Yes. And like I asked one more question as well, that sometimes, I have heard, from the executive and the mid senior level that, sometimes they are not able to reach out to leadership because of the high designations which they carry. So how they should, that break the ice so that, both the parties can come together to solve a query, solve a question or a problem.
Yeah. So it comes down to the point that we mentioned earlier, that relationship you build with your team, that trust that you build with the team, and I think I've not seen at least in my career, that someone reached out to someone for help or question and were not able to answer, regardless of their seniority or regardless of the question where that question came from. So I think if you are eager and hungry and wanted answers and wanted to learn, you shouldn't have you should always, you know, ask
Yeah,
the right
right.
people. There is no
Yes.
right question or wrong question, but there is always right people. I think that's one thing that it should be done. um I don't think it's wrong to reach out to whomever to get that question answered or that task done or at least clarification, because what is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is they're going to say no, maybe check with this person. I think that's the worst case scenario, and it's a risk that you should be willing to take. And finally, I would say you will regret not asking rather than asking and getting the wrong answer. I think
Right.
that's another one.
Yeah. So it is more about, being open and transparent and then reaching out to leadership instead of assuming that, maybe we'll not get the answer.
Absolutely. I would have, in my case, I would appreciate someone asking me and providing the answer or not, then someone making certain actions or not knowing about the things without trying at least to ask the question. It doesn't hurt. I think the risk without asking, with going without asking, it's bigger than actually just, you know, asking.
Right, and that was my intent to ask this question for the entire audience out there who are watching this podcast, because there's a myth about the certain leadership that leadership style that we are not able to reach out. So with your answers and with your answer and with this podcast, I want to convey to all my audience that please go and reach out to your managers, to your leadership, communicate. I think transparency is the key, which we have learned, and you need to open up.
Absolutely. And I think asking questions, it it serves two purposes. Firstly, it tells me that person is needing to know, wanting to know. I will never take it as someone doesn't know, and he should know or she should know this. Obviously, no one takes it that way. So for me, if someone asks a question, I take it as okay. There is curiosity. There is, willingness to know, learn, and all of
Yes.
that. The second piece is it provides visibility to that person. Now I will be familiar with that person. So next time I know, hey, that person's name came up, I was like, okay, well, that person asked me before. So I think it serves quite a bit of purposes, especially in a complex environment. There is so much attention. So I think certain names sound and resonate in your mind when they ask questions, when they you see that name popping up, often. It does help.
Yes, exactly. And with this entire conversation till now, I'm sure our audience would have, the real check, the myth which they are holding up against the leadership for the corporate. Definitely, they are getting the real fact check answers from your end via our podcast.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think leadership in general, they wouldn't gotten to the place where they have gotten to if they did not. You have to have a people skill, right? And in addition to the technology, knowledge, experience, all of that, the people aspect of it is crucial. So keep in mind that people in leadership, they've gotten there because they know how to deal and work with team members, with people. Therefore, the chances of you getting a positive responses from those leadership when you ask a lot of questions are higher than um, you know
Yes.
getting the answer of negative answer from those higher leadership, if that makes sense. So generally speaking, I would say, yeah, uh, leadership is always, willing to help and positive. They've gone through that path as well.
So, with all your answers till now, Omar, and I'm going to ask you the last question for this podcast. So, what are the challenges which you face in your, daily, personal, professional life, more of a professional front, which people don't see, but that's a challenge for you, which you resolve every day and have reached to a level.
Well, I think there is a list of I think there is a list of challenges that I deal with in my corporate professional life on a daily basis. I think the first one is a finding balance between clients' expectation, team's capacity, quality standards, and business targets, right? So you have different stakeholders, different parts that you need to deal with. and you have to find a balance. And there are all priorities. So it's a competing priority kind of environment. You need to balance between all of these without compromising on one. So I think that pressure there is tremendous, right? Um, that's the first pressure that I deal with. Then layer of decision making, right? So you often have to make calls with incomplete information, knowing that the impact could go on hundreds of, let's say, markets, campaigns, or work people's workload. But you have to make those decisions sometimes with no enough information because you are on time and you need to make that call very quickly. So you don't always have that luxury of time to make such informative decision. And that's where the experience comes in. So there is that pressure of making the right decision with not enough information. I think that part of it. Then there is the emotional part, I think. There is the um,
Yes.
part people they don't see the emotional responsibility. When your team looks for stability, especially in high environment projects and so on. So people look for stability, for for certainty, and you have to provide them that, right? Sometimes you don't even know that exists, but you have to absorb the pressure and show them that everything is handled. So I think over time I've learned to manage it by building strong structure, trusting my leads, my managers, and being very deliberate about where I focus my energy, my time, both that invisible layer of responsibility that's probably heaviest part of my role. So I think that's the biggest pressure indeed.
So, any tips from your end talking about emotional stability, how the resilience was built? Because nowadays, working into corporate, people have the challenges, balancing their work life, having the mental stability. So, any tips or guidance from your end for our audience?
Oh, I think the advice I would give is at the end of the day, it's a corporation, so you cooperate with people as well, and in order for that which work, you have to have strong leaders and strong managers that you trust and delegate. So that trust needs to be built, so that way it's a shared responsibility, right? And everybody's accountable, everybody's responsible, and they understand, because at the end of the day that pressure comes in and you hold that pressure yourself because you feel like you can't trust the people to make their decisions. So I think if you have that trust around you and that support, you shouldn't face this challenge. Additionally, I would say openness, right? So when you speak to the team, I think the more open you are, the more understanding they are. With the limit, of course, there are always things that you should, filter out, because again, you don't want that pressure to come down heavy on the others. So I think uh, more transparency, more sharing,
Yes.
responsible sharing, I would say, it's always a key. And then trust between the team and team members and the team. I think that also, relieves the stress. And of course, there are outside of work ways to reduce that stress. At the end of the day, you think, you know, yes, I made the right decision, or that decision, right or wrong, with the best information I had at that moment, right? And that actually gives yourself, confidence that, you know what, it's not like I did this intentionally. I did it with the best information I had at that time. That actually, that reasoning makes you, makes you feel not better, but makes the stress actually logic to some extent, right?
Right. And the last question, Omar, again on this answer of yours, how important is it to set a boundary given the expectation with your team or maybe the client or the entire ecosystem where the corporate functions? But at the same time, how important it is to set a boundary and how healthy that boundary should be. This question I'm asking just to give a advice on a positive note to all the newcomers who are going to be a part of corporate. So they look up to you, to our podcast, and they learn from our answers. Maybe a bit.
It's such a difficult question, yet very crucial. So boundaries, um, setting up boundaries between you and the class. So firstly, I would say, from my own experience, I do have certain boundaries with the client, okay, with customers. And then I have different boundaries for the team. So I always add a buffer of that boundaries. I think that's the logic I go with because I know it's all about the personality of the counterpart, right? So I understand my clients, how they think, the main stakeholders, what their personality is, and are they boundary oriented or not? Are they willing to cross that? So there are a lot of factors you take in consideration when you have a client and you want to set a boundary with. So you do leave a certain buffer. So that way, if they cross the first line of it, then you are firm, but again, there is a second line of defense. So I think there is a bit of a buffer with the team. I think you set a wider buffer because at the end of the day, the team that you work with, there will always, again, there will always be boundaries crossed in terms of, and I'm treating this as a deadline for some reason, but I'm looking at it as boundaries, buffer in my head. I need to make sure that again, the closer the relationship with the people that I work with, the different boundaries. It's not one rule for all of them, right? It depends
Right.
on the roles, depends on their personalities, depends on cultures in sometimes because different cultures understand boundaries differently. And I think that is a people skill that you learn when you interact with different, nationalities and so on. So you start to understand, well, maybe person comes from this region, they look at that differently, right? And you set up those boundaries. You personalize boundaries basically as per person and personalities and background. I think that's the advice actually is to not focus much on boundaries as much as that person's personality and the behavior.
Thank you so much, Omar, for your entire expertise, sharing your valuable knowledge, and giving us your time as well over the podcast. So, before we wrap up for the day, any closing statement you want to give from your end?
Well, firstly, I want to thank you for having me here and giving my opinion. I would say it's not more of an answer than an opinion in my side on how I look at things. Maybe the answers will basically differ from one person's career to the other. But it's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me. I think you've asked me great questions, and I hope I was able to answer to the best. I do
Yes.
want to give one advice to the audience that um, it's all about understanding the counterpart. It's all about that. I think if you are a people person and you understand um, people manage, which I would say, if you understand the people, the culture, that helps you solve all the problem or have no problem or have a lot of problem, right? It's all depends on their perception. I think if you master that social skill, everything else is doable. Everything else, with no exception, it's doable. I think that's my advice: is the people skill.
Rightly said, Omar. And that's a wrap for today. Thank you so much for being a part of this leadership podcast, and looking forward to have more episodes sooner with you face to face when you are back in India. Till
Absolutely,
that
pleasure.
time, till the time, stay tuned for Noble by Richa.
Thank you very much. Thank you.